It began with a silence, an uneasy calm that settled over the American encampments like a blanket of fog. General George Washington stood at the edge of a lookout point near the Hudson River, the wind tugging gently at his coat. For 6 long years, he had carried the weight of a fragile nation on his shoulders. Victories had been rare, defeats had been plenty, and hope had survived only because the people believed he would not allow it to die. But now, in 1781, something had shifted, almost imperceptibly at first. Letters arrived from France. Messengers rode day and night with coded dispatches, and maps littered tables in dimly lit tents. Washington sensed it before he fully understood it. The war that had stretched across the colonies like a storm cloud was finally moving toward its breaking point. The British, under General Charles Cornwallis, had shifted their operations to the south, sweeping up victories in Georgia and the Carolinas. Their campaigns seemed unstoppable until their own confidence became their weakness. Cornwallis believed Virginia would be his final triumph, the strike that would sever the rebellion's lifeline. He moved his army toward the small port town of Yorktown, setting up fortifications on a peninsula surrounded by the York River on one side and the Chesapeake Bay on the other. To him, it was a strategic position, an escape route by sea, a defensive nest on land. To Washington, once he learned of Cornwallis's whereabouts, it looked like something else. A trap. Yet even as that realization dawned, the path to victory was anything but clear. Washington needed allies, troops, ships coordination on a scale the Continental Army had never attempted. And most of all, he needed speed. Every hour risked disaster. Every mile brought the danger of British scouts discovering his movement. Suspense hung over every decision, every whispered conversation late into the night. Weeks earlier, Washington had believed New York would be the decisive battlefield. He had watched the British forces occupy the city since 1776, turning it into a seemingly impenetrable fortress. But when French General Rochambeau arrived with thousands of seasoned soldiers, another possibility slowly emerged. The French fleet under Admiral de Grasse was sailing toward the Chesapeake, not New York. That single detail changed everything. If the Americans could mislead the British commanders, if they could convince them that New York was still the target, they might move south without interference. But it required something Washington valued even more than courage: deception. He ordered fake troop movements. He had soldiers build ovens near the Hudson to appear as though they were preparing for extended encampment. Letters were deliberately leaked. Roads were cleared in the opposite direction of where the army intended to march. And then, in late August 1781, Washington gave the order. Tens of thousands of soldiers, American and French, began the long, hurried march south. They moved silently during the nights, dust rising behind them like the tail of some great and ancient beast. Rumors whispered through the ranks. Was this the end? Was this the moment they had bled for, starved for, frozen for through countless winters? No one knew for certain, but everyone felt it. For the first time in years, victory didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a direction. When Washington reached Virginia and saw the French fleet controlling the Chesapeake Bay, the tension in his chest loosened just enough to breathe. De Grasse had arrived in time. An entire British fleet had been driven back. Cornwallis was cut off from rescue. The noose slowly tightened. Still, the British general was confident. His fortifications were strong. His artillery was powerful. He had never imagined the American forces could move with such coordination, or that the French alliance would come with such formidable might. That overconfidence would cost him everything. By late September, Washington and Rochambeau had surrounded Yorktown. Earthworks crept forward like the teeth of a massive creature closing in. The air trembled with the sounds of hammers, shovels, whispered commands in French and English. Soldiers dug trenches under the cover of darkness, every shovel of dirt bringing them closer to the enemy lines. Suspense gnawed at their nerves. Cornwallis watched from inside his defenses, waiting for an opportunity, any sign that a British rescue fleet might appear on the horizon. None came. On October 9, 1781, Washington touched a torch to a cannon fuse, and the ground shook as the first American shot thundered toward Yorktown. In that echoing boom, the siege officially began. Day and night, cannon fire rained upon the British positions. The sky glowed with fiery arcs, and the earth shook with relentless force. Buildings splintered, walls cracked, and the once ordered British camp descended into chaos. Cornwallis realized the position was more dangerous than he had believed. His men were exhausted, the fortifications weakening piece by piece. So he made a desperate attempt to escape. Under the cover of a stormy night, he ordered his soldiers into boats to cross the York River, hoping to break out in the dark. Nature, as if siding with the rebellion, turned against him. The wind shifted violently. Waves battered the boats, scattering them helplessly across the water. Soldiers clung to the sides, terrified, as the storm shredded any hope of escape. The attempt collapsed before it even truly began. Cornwallis returned to Yorktown with nothing but the grim knowledge that he had run out of options. Meanwhile, Washington prepared for the final blow. On October 14th, American and French troops launched a daring nighttime assault to seize the last British defensive positions redoubts that protected the heart of Yorktown. Alexander Hamilton, eager to prove himself, led one of the attacks. French soldiers stormed another. Bayonets glinted in the moonlight as they charged forward through musket fire, scaling walls, breaking through barricades. The fighting was brutal, the air thick with smoke and shouts, but the momentum had shifted completely. The redoubts fell, and with them fell British hope. The next morning, Washington stood over a map of the battlefield. His officers gathered around him, silent, tense. The British defenses were shattered. Their ammunition supplies were dwindling. Their men were starving. The end hovered in the air, almost unbelievable after so many years of struggle. On October 17th, a solitary drummer boy emerged from the British lines. A white flag followed. The siege of Yorktown, 16 days of relentless pressure, had forced Cornwallis to ask for terms. For the American soldiers who saw the flag, the moment felt unreal. Some cried, others laughed. Many simply stared, trying to grasp the meaning of it. After years of suffering, valleys of hunger, nights of fear, battles that seemed unwinnable, this sight felt like witnessing history breathe. 2 days later, Cornwallis's army marched out to surrender. British troops stacked their weapons, their drums beating a slow, mournful tune. Cornwallis himself refused to attend the ceremony, claiming illness, a final gesture of pride that fooled no one. Washington, maintaining his dignity, refused to accept the surrender from anyone but Cornwallis himself, leading to a symbolic exchange handled by his subordinate. As the British colors were lowered, a strange stillness fell over the fields of Yorktown. The war was not officially over. Peace negotiations would take time, and skirmishes persisted elsewhere, but this moment broke the spine of British political will. In London, support for the war collapsed almost overnight. Parliament debated in panic. Public opinion turned sharply. For the first time, Britain understood that the cost of crushing the rebellion had grown too high, and victory, once promised, was now impossible. In the American camps, Washington walked quietly among his soldiers. Many cheered for him, but he did not celebrate. Years of war had carved lines into his face, years of responsibility bending heavily on his back. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, something else flickered: relief, pride, and a sense of destiny fulfilled. The victory at Yorktown had not come from strength alone. It had come from patience, intelligence, sacrifice, and a fragile but powerful alliance. It came from farmers who became fighters, from French sailors who crossed an ocean, from enslaved men who sought freedom on the battlefield, and from ordinary people who dared to imagine that a new nation could rise from rebellion. As night fell over Yorktown, the fires of the camps flickered gently. Soldiers told stories, some sang, others prayed. The wind carried their voices softly into the dark, as though the land itself were listening. This, they knew, was the beginning of something far greater than the end of a war. It was the birth of a nation. And in that quiet, victorious night, George Washington looked toward the horizon, not with the eyes of a general searching for danger, but with the eyes of a leader ready to guide a free people into an uncertain, hopeful future.